Marry the fat one, Papa. The fat bride was mocked until the mountain man's little girl called her Mom. The dusty town hall falls silent. Laughter dies on men's lips. The woman everyone ridiculed is suddenly chosen, not by pity, but by the innocent cry of a grieving child. A shotgun wedding under lantern light seals her fate, but what seems like mercy soon draws her into a storm. Outlaws of progress, the railroad men, want the land beneath her feet. And the tribe who still holds treaty rights will not let go without a fight. The cabin becomes a battleground of shame, faith, and survival. She was mocked as unworthy, but she may be the only one who can save them all. In a world where pride can tear a family apart, and greed can steal a valley's water. Will the woman scorned as the fat bride rise as the mother, wife, and peacemaker this frontier town never expected? Or will cruelty and pride destroy everything she loves? Drop a comment below and share which part of the world you're tuning in from today. If you enjoy stories like this, don't forget to subscribe for more. The little town hall glowed warm against the darkening spring evening. Lantern light spilled from its windows, dancing across the weathered wooden steps where boot heels had worn smooth patches over the years. Inside, fiddle music swirled through the air, mixing with laughter and the shuffle of feet on the plank floor. Naomi stood with her back pressed against the rough wall, her fingers worrying the fabric of her best dress, a serviceable brown cotton she'd sewn herself. Around her, other young women lined the walls in their borrowed finery, their eyes bright with hope as they waited for someone to notice them. The scent of spring flowers decorated the wooden posts, and a cool breeze drifted through the open windows, carrying the sweet promise of the season. Her heart fluttered each time the fiddle struck up a new tune. Perhaps this time, she thought, someone might ask her to dance. She watched as ranch hands in their Sunday best led giggling girls onto the floor, their boots marking time to the lively music. The sight made her own feet itch to move, to be part of the swirling couples. Near the punch bowl, several cowhands huddled together, casting glances her way that made her stomach clench. Their whispers carried just far enough for her to catch fragments, cruel jests about her size that brought heat to her cheeks. Naomi tried to hold her head high the way her mama had taught her before she passed, but each snicker cut deep. Taking a deep breath, Naomi gathered her courage. When the next song began, she stepped forward, hoping that perhaps someone would see past her heavy frame to the gentle heart beneath. The movement caught the attention of young Tommy Wilson, who stood with his father near the door. "Marry the fat one, Papa," Tommy called out, his high voice piercing through the music. "She'd keep you warm in winter." The room erupted in laughter. Some tried to hide their amusement behind their hands, while others made no attempt to mask their cruel mirth. The sound crashed over Naomi like a wave of ice water, drowning out the fiddles and leaving her frozen in place. Reverend Matthew stepped forward, his weathered face stern. "That's enough now," he called out, trying to restore order to his flock. "We're here to celebrate community, not tear it down." But the damage was done. Naomi retreated to the darkest corner she could find, her cheeks burning and tears threatening to spill despite her fierce determination to hold them back. She pressed her hands against the rough wall behind her, using its solid presence to ground herself as she fought to keep her composure. The minister's wife approached with a cup of punch and a kind smile, but Naomi couldn't bear the pity in her eyes. She accepted the cup with trembling fingers, more for something to hold than any desire to drink. Outside, the distinct sound of wagon wheels crunching on gravel cut through the renewed music and chatter. The noise drew attention. New arrivals this late in the evening were unusual. Through the windows, Naomi could see a tall figure climbing down from a wagon, then reaching up to help a smaller form descend. Sam Holt's entrance brought a subtle shift to the room's atmosphere. He filled the doorway for a moment, his broad shoulders and quiet presence commanding attention without effort. His daughter Annie clung to his hand, her small fingers wrapped tight around his calloused ones. The little girl's black mourning dress and solemn face were stark reminders of the loss that still shadowed their family. Naomi watched as Sam nodded curtly to those nearby, his expression neutral but his eyes alert. He was a man more comfortable in the wilderness than at social gatherings, and it showed in the way he carried himself, like a mountain lion that had wandered into a henhouse, unsure of its welcome but too proud to show concern. Annie's grip on her father's hand remained firm as they moved into the room. The child's eyes, wise beyond her years, scanned the crowd until they settled on Naomi in her corner. There was something in that young gaze that made Naomi's breath catch, a recognition, perhaps, or a kinship of lonely souls. The room had grown quieter with Sam's arrival, conversations dropping to murmurs. His reputation preceded him. A skilled mountain man turned rancher, widowed these past 6 months, a man who spoke little but whose words carried weight when he chose to use them. Some feared him, others respected him, but all gave him space as he made his way through the crowd. Reverend Matthews approached the pair, offering a warm handshake to Sam and a grandfatherly smile to Annie. "We're glad you could join us, Sam. Annie, my dear, you've grown since I saw you last." Annie didn't respond beyond a slight nod, her eyes still drawn to Naomi's corner. Sam's quiet. "Much obliged, Reverend," seemed to release some of the tension in the room, and gradually the normal flow of conversation resumed. The fiddles struck up another tune, this one slower and sweeter than before. Couples began to form on the dance floor, and once again the young women along the walls straightened their spines and smoothed their skirts. Hope renewed. Naomi remained in her corner, the punch cup cool against her palms. She watched as Annie whispered something to her father, tugging at his hand and pointing in Naomi's direction. Sam's expression didn't change, but his eyes found Naomi's across the room, held her gaze for a long moment that seemed to stretch like taffy. The earlier mockery still stung, but something about that small girl's interested stare and her father's steady look began to ease the tightness in Naomi's chest. She managed a small smile, directed more at Annie than at Sam, and was rewarded with the child's answering grin, the first real smile anyone had seen from her since her mother's passing. In that moment, as the fiddles played and lantern light cast dancing shadows on the walls, Naomi couldn't have known that this evening would mark the beginning of a change in her life. She couldn't have guessed that the cruel laughter and burning shame would lead to something she'd never dared to hope for. All she knew was that a little girl in a black dress was looking at her as if she'd found something she'd been searching for, and that somehow, it made the weight of others' judgment easier to bear. The music faded to a gentle whisper as Sam guided Annie through the doorway of the town hall. Their entrance drew every eye, a reminder of both Sam's commanding presence and the tragedy that had left little Annie motherless. The girl's black dress seemed to absorb the lantern light, making her appear even smaller than her 7 years. Naomi pressed herself further into her corner, trying to disappear. Tears slid silently down her cheeks despite her best efforts to contain them. The sting of public mockery still fresh. She dabbed at her face with her handkerchief, hoping no one would notice her distress. Annie's sharp eyes scanned the room, moving past the dancing couples and gathering crowds until they landed on Naomi. Something in the woman's gentle demeanor and obvious pain called to the child. She tugged insistently at her father's sleeve, drawing his attention to the corner where Naomi stood. "Pa," Annie whispered, her voice urgent. Before Sam could respond, she pulled free from his grip and darted across the wooden floor, her small boots making determined little thumps against the planks. The crowd parted in surprise as Annie ran straight to Naomi. Without hesitation, the child wrapped her arms around Naomi's waist, pressing her face against the soft brown cotton of her dress. The embrace was fierce and desperate, filled with 6 months of longing for a mother's touch. Naomi stood frozen, her hands hovering uncertainly above Annie's shoulders. The girl looked up, her face full of hope and longing. "Mama?" The word rang out clear as a bell in the suddenly quiet hall. Gasps rippled through the crowd like wind through prairie grass. Women covered their mouths with gloved hands, and men shifted uncomfortably. The fiddler's bows faltered, leaving only the echo of Annie's declaration hanging in the air. Naomi trembled, torn between the instinct to comfort the child and the fear of overstepping. Her eyes sought Sam's face, searching for some clue as to how she should respond. The tears she'd been fighting spilled over again. But these were different. Born of confusion and an aching tenderness for the little girl who held her so tightly. Sam crossed the floor in long strides, his spurs jingling softly with each step. Instead of pulling Annie away as some might have expected, he placed a strong, weathered hand on Naomi's shoulder. His touch was gentle but firm, steadying her obvious trembling. "If my child calls her mother," Sam announced, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall, "then she will be." The words fell like stones into still water, sending ripples of shock through the assembled townspeople. The cruel laughter that had filled the room earlier died instantly, replaced by a silence so profound that the crackling of the lantern wicks seemed loud. Those who had mocked Naomi now stood slack-jawed, unable to process this sudden turn of events. "Sam Holtz lost his mind," someone whispered from the back of the room. The mountain airs addled his brain. "Hush now," another voice responded. "Look at that child." Annie hadn't loosened her grip on Naomi's waist. If anything, she held on tighter, as if afraid this moment might slip away. Her face shone with a joy that had been absent since her mother's passing, and none could deny the genuine love in her expression. Reverend Matthews stepped forward, clearing his throat. His fingers worried at his collar as he searched for appropriate words. "Sam," he began carefully, "while I appreciate the sentiment, perhaps we should take some time to—" "No." Sam's response was quiet but carried the unmistakable force of a mountain stream in spring. "You'll marry us tonight, Reverend. Right here. Right now." The minister's eyebrows rose toward his receding hairline. "But surely, my Annie needs a mother," Sam continued, his hand still steady on Naomi's shoulder. "And I reckon any woman who can bring that light back to my girl's eyes is worth more than all the gold in Colorado territory." Naomi's heart thundered in her chest. She looked up at Sam, searching his face for any sign of doubt or mockery. Instead, she found only determination and something softer, respect, perhaps, or the beginning of tenderness. "Miss?" Sam's voice gentled as he addressed her directly. "I ain't much for fancy words or courtship, but I'm offering you a home, a family, and my protection. Will you have us?" Fresh tears spilled down Naomi's cheeks. She looked down at Annie, still holding her tight, then back to Sam. Her voice trembled, but held firm as she answered, "Yes." The words seemed to release something in the room. Several women dabbed at their eyes, moved despite themselves. The young ranch hands who had mocked her earlier shuffled their feet, shamefaced and unable to meet her gaze. "Very well," Reverend Matthews said, squaring his shoulders. "If you're both determined, then we'll proceed. Though it's highly irregular." "Ain't nothing regular about love," Sam replied quietly. "Or family." The minister gestured for them to step forward and the crowd parted to form a makeshift aisle. Annie finally released her grip on Naomi's waist, but only to take her hand, beaming up at her soon-to-be mother. Sam offered his arm to Naomi, who took it with trembling fingers. Together, they walked to where Reverend Matthews waited. The fiddlers, sensing the moment, began to play softly, a gentle hymn that floated through the hall like a blessing. "Dearly beloved," the minister began, his voice growing stronger as he found his footing in the familiar words. "We are gathered here tonight in the sight of God." Naomi stood straight and proud beside Sam as the ceremony proceeded. The tears had dried on her cheeks, replaced by a quiet dignity that transformed her face. Those who had laughed at her sighs now saw only the beauty of a woman becoming a mother and wife. The vows were simple and traditional. Sam's "I do" was firm and clear, while Naomi's came out soft but unwavering. Annie stood between them, holding both their hands, her face glowing with joy. When Reverend Matthews pronounced them man and wife, Sam lifted Naomi's hand to his lips in a gesture of surprising gentleness. The kiss was brief but respectful, a promise of protection sealed before all present. The townsfolk who had gathered to mock now found themselves witnesses to something unexpectedly sacred. Where there had been cruel laughter, now there were murmured blessings. Where there had been judgment, now there was the humbling sight of love working its mysterious ways. Annie threw her arms around both of them, her small frame barely able to encompass their combined girth. "We're a family now," she declared, her voice ringing with certainty. Naomi knelt down to embrace her new daughter properly, no longer caring about the tears that fell or what anyone might think of them. Sam's hand rested on both their shoulders, completing the circle of their newly formed family. The fiddlers struck up a proper wedding tune and Sam led his new wife onto the dance floor. They moved together carefully, still strangers in many ways, but united in their love for the small girl watching them with shining eyes. Those who had come to the social expecting entertainment of one sort found themselves witness to a different kind altogether, the kind that reminded them of the transformative power of love, especially when it came wrapped in unexpected packages. The wagon wheels creaked steadily as Sam guided the team away from town, the horses' hooves raising small clouds of dust in the moonlight. Behind them, The lanterns of the social grew smaller until they vanished entirely, leaving only stars and a bright half-moon to light their way. Naomi sat rigid on the wagon seat, her thoughts whirling like autumn leaves. Just hours ago, she had stood in that corner, burning with shame from cruel laughter. Now she wore a plain gold band on her finger and had a child sleeping trustingly against her arm. Annie had dozed off almost immediately, her small body warm and heavy with exhaustion. The night air carried the scent of sage and pine, growing stronger as they left the valley. Sam handled the reins with practiced ease, his broad shoulders blocking some of the cool spring wind. He hadn't spoken much since they'd left, but Naomi noticed how his eyes constantly scanned the trail ahead, watching for holes or rocks that might jostle the wagon. "Annie," he said finally, his voice softer than she'd heard it before. "She ain't slept proper since her mama passed. 6 months of nightmares and crying." He paused, adjusting his grip on the reins. "But look at her now." Naomi glanced down at the peaceful face pressed against her sleeve. "She's a precious child," she whispered, careful not to wake her. "I'll do my best to be worthy of her trust." Sam nodded, keeping his eyes on the trail. That's all anyone can do. His words were few, but something in his tone suggested volumes of meaning beneath them. They passed scattered ranch houses, their windows glowing dimly in the distance like earthbound stars. A dog barked somewhere, and cattle lowed in their night pastures. The familiar sounds of valley life gradually faded as the wagon climbed higher into the foothills. The pines grew thicker here, their shadows deep and mysterious in the moonlight. A coyote's haunting call echoed from a distant ridge, answered by others in a wild chorus that made Naomi shiver despite herself. She'd never lived this far from town before. "Don't fret," Sam said, noticing her tension. "They keep to themselves mostly. Good at keeping the rabbits from overrunning the garden, truth be told." Naomi tried to smile, grateful for his attempt at reassurance. The wagon rocked steadily onward, climbing switchbacks that revealed glimpses of the valley below. The town was just a cluster of faint lights now, seemingly as distant as her old life. The false dawn was just beginning to pale the eastern sky when Sam turned the wagon onto a narrower trail. "Home's just ahead," he said quietly. "It ain't much, but it's solid built. Ground's good for growing when summer comes." The cabin appeared through the trees, and Naomi's heart tightened at the sight. It was rough but well made, with sturdy log walls and a stone chimney that spoke of careful craftsmanship. A small barn stood to one side, and beyond it, she could make out fields still brown from winter waiting for spring planting. Annie stirred as the wagon stopped, blinking sleepily. "Are we home, Papa?" "That we are, little one." Sam jumped down from the wagon, his boots crunching on the packed earth of the yard. He came around to help Naomi down, his hands strong and sure as she stepped carefully to the ground. The cabin door creaked as Sam pushed it open, the sound loud in the pre-dawn stillness. Naomi hesitated on the threshold, suddenly unsure of herself. The interior was dark until Sam struck a match, lighting a lamp that revealed the simple room beyond. The cabin's contents told a story of absence that made Naomi's throat tight. Dust lay thick on the shelves built into the walls. An empty rocking chair sat in the corner, its runners marking curved lines in the dust on the plank floor. Carefully folded quilts were stacked on a trunk, as if waiting for someone's return. Annie's small hand slipped into hers, squeezing tight. "Don't leave," the child whispered, her voice trembling with sudden fear. "Please stay with us." Naomi knelt down, meeting Annie's worried gaze. "I'm not going anywhere, dear heart. This is home now." The words surprised her with their firmness, as if speaking them aloud made them more real. Sam busied himself at the fireplace, carefully laying kindling and logs from the box beside the hearth. Soon, a small flame caught and grew, pushing back the shadows and bringing warmth to the cool room. "Trunk there has spare linens," Sam said, straightening up. "Annie can show you where things go. I'll tend to the horses and bring in your things." Left alone with Annie, Naomi took a deep breath and looked around the cabin with fresh eyes. Yes, it showed signs of lacking a woman's touch, but she could see the care that had gone into its building. The walls were chinked tight against winter winds, the floor swept despite the dust. This was a home waiting to live again. "Can I help unpack?" Annie asked, already pulling at the strings of a bundle. "Mama used to let me help with the linens." Naomi swallowed hard at the casual mention of Annie's mother, but kept her voice steady. Of course you can help. Let's see what needs doing first. Together, they began the work of settling in. Annie chattered softly as they put away the few belongings Naomi had brought, sharing little details about the cabin and its routines. The shelf by the window was where Mama had kept her herbs for cooking. The hook by the door held Papa's good hat for church. Each casual mention was like a small stone, building a wall of memory that Naomi wasn't sure how to navigate. Sam made several trips from the wagon, bringing in Naomi's trunk and the wedding gifts some townspeople had hastily pressed upon them. He moved quietly, efficiently, but Naomi noticed how he avoided looking at certain things. The rocking chair, a faded apron still hanging from a peg. As the sky outside brightened toward true dawn, exhaustion began to catch up with them all. Annie's helpful chatter slowed, her eyes growing heavy again. Time for bed, little one, Sam said, scooping her up. You can show Naomi more tomorrow. But I'm not. Annie's protest was lost in a huge yawn. Will you still be here when I wake up? She asked Naomi anxiously. I'll be here, Naomi promised, smoothing the child's hair. Sleep well, dear heart. Sam carried Annie up the ladder to the loft, leaving Naomi alone with her thoughts. She sank into a chair by the fire, feeling the weight of the day's events settle over her like a heavy quilt. Her fingers found the wedding band, turning it slowly. The floor creaked as Sam descended the ladder. She's already asleep, he said quietly. First time she's gone down easy since. He left the sentence unfinished, but Naomi understood. An awkward silence fell between them. They were strangers still, bound together by a child's need and a moment of public declaration. Naomi couldn't help wondering if Sam was already regretting his impulsive decision. Perhaps in the growing light of day he would see what everyone else saw, just the fat one, taken in out of pity. I know it ain't much, Sam said suddenly, gesturing at the cabin, and I know it ain't what you might have dreamed of, getting married like that, in front of those who'd been cruel to you. He ran a hand through his hair, searching for words. But I meant what I said. Annie needs a mother and you. You showed more kindness in one moment than those folks showed in all their years of knowing you. Naomi felt tears threatening again, but forced them back. I'll do my best, she said simply, for Annie and for this home. Sam nodded as if she'd confirmed something important. Sun's coming up, he said, moving toward the door. I need to see to the stock. You should rest while you can. Annie's usually up with the birds. Left alone, Naomi sat in the growing light, watching dust motes dance in the sunbeams now streaming through the windows. Outside, she could hear Sam in the barn, the comfortable sounds of animals being tended. A robin called from somewhere nearby, welcoming the dawn. The cabin around her felt both foreign and familiar, like a dress that didn't quite fit, but might, with time and careful adjustment. She touched the empty rocking chair gently, a silent acknowledgement of the woman who had sat there before. Then she stood, squared her shoulders, and began to plan how she might make this place her home. Not to replace what was lost, but to build something new from the foundation of love that Annie had laid with one simple word. Morning light streamed through the cabin's small windows, casting warm squares on the plank floor. Naomi blinked awake on the narrow cot Sam had set up for her near the hearth. She'd barely slept, her mind racing with thoughts of her sudden new life. The weight of responsibility settled over her as she rose, straightening her wrinkled dress from yesterday. The cabin was quiet except for the soft crackle of the banked fire. Above in the loft, she could hear Annie's gentle breathing. Sam's boots were already gone from their place by the door. He'd risen before dawn, she supposed, to tend to the ranch work. Naomi moved to the kitchen area, her hands trembling slightly as she surveyed the supplies. The shelves held basic provisions: cornmeal, flour, salt pork, and dried beans. She found a cast-iron skillet hanging from a peg, its surface well-seasoned but dusty from disuse. I can do this, she whispered to herself, reaching for the cornmeal. She'd cooked plenty at the orphanage where she'd grown up, helping in the kitchen. But this was different. This was her first meal as a wife, as a mother. The fire responded quickly to her careful tending, and soon the skillet was hot. She mixed cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, working quickly but carefully. The batter sizzled as it hit the iron, forming golden circles that filled the cabin with a homey aroma. Footsteps on the porch made her jump. Sam entered, carrying a pail of fresh milk. He nodded to her but said nothing, setting the pail on the table. His silence made her fingers tremble as she turned the corn cakes. "Papa?" Annie's voice rang from above, followed by the sound of small feet on the ladder. The child's face lit up when she saw Naomi at the stove. "You're really here. I was afraid I dreamed it." "Good morning, dear heart," Naomi said softly, managing a smile despite her nerves. "Are you hungry?" "Starving." Annie bounced to the table, her energy filling the quiet cabin. "Papa, Mama's making corn cakes." Sam glanced up at the name, his expression unreadable. Naomi placed a plate before each of them, her heart pounding as she waited for their reaction. Annie dove in immediately, making happy sounds around her first bite. Sam took a slower taste, chewing thoughtfully. He didn't praise the food, but he cleaned his plate and accepted seconds when Naomi offered them. It wasn't much, but it felt like a small victory. After breakfast, Naomi ventured outside to explore the homestead. The spring air was crisp, carrying the scent of pine and wet earth. She could see now what she'd missed in the pre-dawn arrival, signs of neglect that spoke of a man struggling alone. The chicken coop leaned slightly, its fence missing several slats. The kitchen garden was overgrown with last year's dead stalks. Even the barn looked tired, its paint peeling in the mountain weather. She found Sam mending a harness near the barn. "The chicken coop needs fixing," she said carefully. "I could help, if you'd show me how." He looked up, surprised. "That's men's work." "It's needed work," she replied, gathering her courage, "and I'm stronger than I look." Sam studied her for a long moment. "Lost my Ellen last winter," he said finally, his voice rough. "Influenza took her quick. Haven't kept up with everything like I should." "I'm not trying to replace her," Naomi said softly, "but I'm here now and I can help." He nodded slowly, then gathered some tools and lumber. Together they worked on the coop, Naomi holding boards steady while Sam hammered. Her arms ached, but she didn't complain. She noticed him watching her when he thought she wasn't looking, surprise flickering in his eyes at her capability. The sun was high when they heard horses approaching. 3 men rode into the yard, their manner casual but their eyes sharp with curiosity. Naomi recognized them from town, the Blackwood brothers, whose ranch bordered Sam's land. "Holt," the eldest brother called out, "heard you got yourself hitched last night." "News travels fast," Sam replied evenly, setting down his hammer. The men dismounted, their gazes falling on Naomi. She felt her cheeks burn as they took in her size, her plain face, her work-dusty dress. "Must have been mighty desperate times," the youngest Blackwood said with a smirk. "To marry up so sudden-like?" "Reckon a man needs someone to mind his young'un," another added, his tone making the words an insult. Naomi's face flamed hotter. She'd heard such remarks all her life, but they still stung. Before Sam could respond, Annie came running from where she'd been playing. "She's Mama now," the child declared fiercely, wrapping her arms around Naomi's waist. "And she's fixing things with Papa, and making corn cakes, and she's staying forever." The men shifted uncomfortably, shamed by the child's pure acceptance. Sam stepped forward, his shoulder nearly touching Naomi's. "My daughter's got the right of it," he said quietly. "Any other opinions ain't welcome here." The Blackwoods made their excuses and rode away soon after, leaving an awkward silence in their wake. Naomi busied herself with gathering eggs, trying to hide how much the encounter had shaken her. That evening, after a simple supper of beans and biscuits, Annie fell asleep in Naomi's lap while she rocked in the chair by the fire. Sam watched them from his seat by the window, cleaning his rifle with careful strokes. "You did good work today," he said suddenly, "with the coop." And he paused, choosing his words. "And with them Blackwoods. Keeping your dignity when they tried to take it." "Thank you," Naomi whispered, touched by this first soft word of approval. Later, after Annie was tucked into her bed, Naomi knelt by the hearth, the fire's warmth wrapped around her like a shawl as she bowed her head in prayer. "Lord," she whispered, "guide my hands and heart in this new life. Help me be what Annie needs, what this home needs. And..." She hesitated, glancing toward where Sam sat reading his Bible by lamplight. "Help me be worthy of this chance you've given me." Through the window, she could see storm clouds gathering over the mountains, dark masses lit by occasional flashes of distant lightning. But here in the cabin, the lamplight was steady, and Annie's soft breathing drifted down from the loft like a blessing. 2 days after the Blackwoods' unwelcome visit, dawn painted the mountain peaks in soft rose and gold. Naomi stood in the yard, eyeing the horse Sam had saddled for her with a mixture of determination and uncertainty. She'd ridden before, but rarely, and never for a full day of surveying pasture land. "Old Belle here's gentle as they come," Sam assured her, adjusting the stirrups to accommodate her. "She'll mind your signals, won't give you any trouble." Naomi gathered her skirts and, with Sam's steady hand helping, managed to mount. Her body protested immediately at the unfamiliar position. Belle shifted beneath her, but true to Sam's word, remained calm. "You sure about this?" Sam asked, swinging easily onto his own mount. "Could wait another day." "No," Naomi said firmly, though her hands trembled slightly on the reins. "I need to learn the land if I'm to be any help here." Annie watched from the porch, wrapped in a shawl against the morning chill. "Can't I come too, Papa?" "Not today, sweet pea," Sam replied. "Mrs. Patterson's coming by to mind you. We'll be back before supper." They set out along a worn trail that wound through stands of pine and aspen. Naomi focused on keeping her seat, grateful when Sam set an easy pace. The morning air carried the scent of sage and wet earth, and somewhere, a meadowlark trilled its spring song. "Got to check the north pastures first," Sam explained as they rode. "Then we'll circle round to that disputed meadow near the creek. Been meaning to ride out there since I heard rumors of railroad men nosing about." Naomi nodded, too concentrated on riding to reply much. Every step of the horse sent twinges through muscles she hadn't known she possessed. But she pressed on, determined to prove herself useful. By midday, they'd covered several miles of pasture land. Sam pointed out boundary markers, water sources, and the best grazing spots. Naomi tried to memorize it all, seeing how the land's health meant survival for their small family. "You're doing well," Sam commented as they paused to rest the horses. "Most city folks would have complained by now." "I'm not most city folks," Naomi replied, managing a small smile despite her discomfort. "The orphanage taught me about hard work, if nothing else." Sam's expression softened slightly. "Reckon it did at that." They rode on, the terrain growing rougher as they approached the contested meadow. Naomi heard the creek before she saw it, a clear stream cutting through rich grassland that spread out beneath scattered cottonwoods. But something else caught her attention, the sharp sound of hammering. Sam tensed in his saddle. "Railroad men," he muttered, spurring his horse forward. 4 men worked in the meadow, driving wooden stakes into the ground and stretching measuring lines between them. Their wagon bore the railroad company's mark. As Sam and Naomi approached, a heavy-set man in a fine coat straightened up, watching their approach with narrow eyes. "This here's private property," Sam called out, his voice carrying the edge of warning. The well-dressed man, clearly the foreman, gave a cold smile. "That's so. According to the deed I carry, this land belongs to the railroad company." "I've got the purchase papers at home," Sam replied, his hand resting near his gun belt. "Bought this spread fair and square 5 years back." The foreman spat tobacco juice onto the grass. "Way I hear it, you bought from a man who didn't have proper right to sell. Railroads had claims since '68. "That's a lie and you know it," Sam's voice remained level. But Naomi could see the tension in his shoulders. The other workers had stopped their tasks watching the exchange. One of them nudged another, smirking as they noticed Naomi. She lifted her chin, refusing to show how their looks affected her. "Courts'll sort it proper," the foreman said with false pleasantness. "Meanwhile, we've got work to do. Railroad's coming through, Holt. Best make your peace with it." "This meadow's not just mine to defend," Sam replied. "You're forgetting about the treaty rights." The foreman's face darkened. "Treaties with savages don't mean much against progress, friend. Railroad's getting this land one way or another. Why don't you take your new missus home before things get unpleasant?" The threat hung in the air like gunsmoke. Naomi saw Sam's hand tighten on his reins, knew he was weighing the odds of a fight. 4 against 1, and her presence making him vulnerable. "We're going," she said quietly, surprising herself. "But we'll be back with the proper papers." The foreman laughed, his men joining in. "Lady, you do better tending your kitchen than mixing in men's business." Sam wheeled his horse around, his face tight with anger. Naomi followed, her back straight, despite the ache in her muscles. They rode in silence until the meadow was out of sight. "Shouldn't have brought you into this," Sam said finally, his voice rough with regret. "I'm glad you did," Naomi replied. "I need to understand what we're facing." The sun was lowering toward the mountains when they reached the cabin. Annie ran out to meet them, chattering about her day with Mrs. Patterson. Naomi dismounted carefully, her legs nearly buckling. Every part of her body screamed in protest, but she forced herself to help Sam tend to the horses before going inside. After a simple supper of salt pork and beans, Sam spread a map across the table. Annie leaned in close, fascinated by the lines and markings. "That meadow's important," Sam explained, his finger tracing the creek's path. "Not just for grazing, but because it borders Cheyenne hunting grounds." He looked at Naomi. "The treaty gave them rights to those territories, but the railroad don't care about Indian laws." "What will happen?" Annie asked, her small face serious. Sam's expression softened as he looked at his daughter. "Could be trouble brewing, Sweet Pea. Railroad men aren't known for backing down easy, and the Cheyenne have their own justice." Naomi listened, feeling the weight of this new knowledge settle over her. She'd married Sam thinking only of escape from mockery, of giving Annie a mother's love. Now she saw larger forces at work: greed for land, broken promises, the clash between progress and tradition. "What can we do?" she asked quietly. Sam folded the map carefully. "Fight it legal ways first. Gotta get them purchase papers to the territory judge before the railroad pushes their claim through." He paused, studying her face. "Won't blame you if you're having second thoughts about all this." Naomi thought of the foreman's sneering face, of Annie's trusting eyes, of the rich meadow that meant survival for both settlers and Cheyenne. Fear fluttered in her chest, but alongside it grew something stronger, a determination she hadn't known she possessed. "I made my choice," she said firmly. "This is my home now, too." Annie slipped her small hand into Naomi's larger one. "We'll help Papa fight the railroad men, won't we, Mama?" "Yes," Naomi answered, squeezing the child's fingers gently. "Yes, we will." Sam nodded slowly, something like respect flickering in his eyes. Outside, a coyote called lonely in the gathering dusk, reminding them all how much hung in the balance. Not just a meadow, but a way of life. A future they'd have to defend together. Naomi woke before dawn to check on Annie, as had become her morning routine. The girl's small room felt unusually warm in the gray light. When Naomi touched Annie's forehead, her heart dropped. The child's skin burned with fever. "Sam," she called, her voice tight with worry. "Come quick." Annie stirred restlessly, her cheeks flushed red against the white pillow. Sam appeared in the doorway, still pulling on his shirt. "She's burning up," Naomi explained, already moving to gather what they needed. "Get me some fresh water from the pump and all the clean cloths you can find." Sam hesitated only a moment before nodding. "I'll ride for the preacher's wife after. She knows about healing herbs." While Sam fetched water, Naomi gently stripped off Annie's sweat-soaked nightgown and sponged her hot skin with a damp cloth. The girl whimpered, her eyes glassy with fever. "Shh, sweetheart," Naomi murmured. "Mama's here." The words came naturally now, no longer feeling strange on her tongue. She sang softly, hymns she remembered from the orphanage, while working to cool Annie's fever. Sam returned with the water, his face tight with a worry. Like this, Naomi showed him how to wring out the cloths and keep them cool and damp. "I'll make some willow bark tea if we have any." Sam watched her capable movements. "And you've done this before?" "At the orphanage," Naomi nodded, not looking up from Annie. "We took turns caring for sick children. Fever was common in winter." "I'll get Mrs. Wilson," Sam said, already heading for the door. "She'll know what herbs might help." The morning crept by slowly. Naomi barely noticed the sun rising, focused entirely on Annie's care. She whispered prayers while changing the cool cloths, remembering how helpless she'd felt as a child, watching others suffer without a mother's comfort. "Not this time," she murmured, smoothing Annie's damp hair. "You have a mama now, little one." Near noon, Sam returned with the preacher's wife, who brought a bundle of dried herbs and experienced hands. Together, they brewed a healing tea and coaxed Annie to sip it slowly. "You're doing well," Mrs. Wilson told Naomi, watching her patient care. "Keep up with the cool cloths. The fever needs to break on its own." The day wore on. Naomi refused to leave Annie's bedside even when Sam insisted she rest. She dozed in the chair between changing cloths and giving sips of tea. As evening approached, Annie's fever finally began to fade. "Mama?" the girl whispered, her eyes clearer now. "Will you sing again?" Naomi's heart swelled. She gathered Annie's small hand in hers and sang softly until the child drifted into peaceful sleep. When she looked up, she found Sam watching from the doorway, something soft in his usually stern expression. "Thank you," he said quietly, for caring for her like she's your own." "She is my own now," Naomi replied simply. "God brought us together for a reason." 4 days later, with Annie fully recovered, they made the trip to town for supplies. Naomi felt the stares as soon as their wagon rolled down the main street. Women gathered in clusters, whispering behind their hands. Men paused in their work to watch them pass. "Look at the size of her," one woman muttered, loud enough to carry. "Poor Sam must have been desperate indeed." "Hush now," another replied, "though it's true enough. What was he thinking, marrying so hasty?" Naomi kept her eyes forward, though her cheeks burned. Annie, perched between them on the wagon seat, reached for her hand. "Don't listen to them, Mama," she said firmly. "They're just mean like those boys at the social." Sam's jaw tightened, but he said nothing as they collected their supplies. The store owner's wife took their money with barely concealed disdain, counting out change as if expecting to be cheated. Sunday morning found them dressed in their best, heading to the little white church on the hill. Naomi had mended Annie's dress and pressed Sam's good shirt, wanting everything perfect. But the cold stares followed them up the church steps. They sat near the back, Annie proudly holding Naomi's hand. The circuit preacher, aged and wise, stood to deliver his sermon on Galatians 6, verse 2. "Bear ye one another's burdens, and so fulfill the law of Christ." "We are called," he proclaimed, his voice carrying to the rafters. "Not to judge, but to support. Not to mock, but to lift up. Every soul carries burdens we cannot see, and God asks us to help bear them." Naomi felt tears prick her eyes, remembering years of judgment about her size, years of loneliness. The preacher's words touched something deep within her, a reminder that her worth came not from others' approval, but from God's love. "Let us examine our hearts," the preacher continued, "and ask if we truly bear one another's burdens, or if we add to them with cruel words and cold shoulders." Several heads in the congregation lowered. Annie squeezed Naomi's hand tighter, and even Sam seemed moved by the message. After the service, as families gathered to visit, the railroad foreman approached them in the churchyard. His fine suit seemed at odds with his hard expression. "A word, Holt," he said, gesturing Sam aside. Naomi watched them move away from the crowd, noting how the foreman's face grew darker as he spoke. She couldn't hear the words, but she saw Sam's shoulders stiffen, his hand clenching at his side. "Mama?" Annie tugged at her skirt. "Why does that man look so angry?" "Some men," Naomi answered carefully, "don't like it when others stand in their way." The foreman's voice carried suddenly across the yard. "Best mind your own business, Holt. Railroad's got friends in high places. Shame if anything happened to your pretty little spread." Sam stepped closer to the foreman, his voice low but intense. "That a threat, mister?" "Just friendly advice," the foreman smiled coldly, "for your family's sake." He tipped his hat to Naomi with mock politeness before striding away. Sam returned to them, his face troubled. "What did he say?" Naomi asked quietly as they walked to their wagon. "Nothing worth repeating," Sam replied, helping Annie up. "But we'll need to be careful. Railroad men don't play fair when they want something." Naomi nodded, understanding growing in her heart. This wasn't just about land anymore. It was about power, about bullies who thought they could take whatever they wanted. She'd faced bullies before, though of a different kind. As they drove home, Annie chattered about the sermon, but Naomi's mind worked on deeper thoughts. She'd found her place in this family, proved her worth as a mother during Annie's illness. Now she would need to prove her strength in other ways. Sam seemed to sense her thoughts. "You don't have to face this fight," he said quietly. "It's my burden to bear." Naomi remembered the preacher's words about bearing burdens together. "No," she replied firmly. "It's our burden now. All of us." Annie nodded solemnly. "That's what family does, Papa. We help each other." Sam's expression softened as he looked at them both. The wagon rolled on toward home, leaving the town's whispers behind. Naomi sat straighter, feeling a new kind of courage growing within her. Not just the strength to face mockery, but the strength to stand beside her family against whatever threats might come. Spring arrived with gentle determination, washing winter's gray from the mountain slopes. The morning air carried the sweet scent of new grass and wild violets as Naomi stepped onto the cabin's front porch. She breathed deeply, savoring the promise held in each fresh dawn. With careful planning, she had transformed a patch of earth beside the cabin into a modest garden. Her fingers worked the rain-softened soil, remembering lessons from the orphanage's garden master. She planted neat rows of beans, carrots, and peas, tucking each seed into the dark earth with a whispered prayer. "Can I help, Mama?" Annie asked, kneeling beside her in the dirt. "Of course, little one." Naomi showed her how to space the seeds just right. Each one needs room to grow strong. While they worked, Naomi taught Annie the hymns she had learned as a child. Their voices lifted together in the clear morning air. All things bright and beautiful, and all creatures great and small. Annie's sweet voice carried the melody while Naomi harmonized softly. From the barn, they could hear Sam working, the steady rhythm of his hammer keeping time with their song. Inside the cabin, Naomi had brought her own kind of spring cleaning. She sorted through old trunks with gentle reverence, carefully folding away items that spoke of Sam's first wife. Some things, like well-worn quilts and cooking pots, she put back into service. Others, precious mementos, she arranged thoughtfully on shelves where Annie could see them. "Mama used to wear this," Annie said one afternoon, touching a faded blue shawl. "Then we'll keep it somewhere special," Naomi replied, wrapping the soft wool and placing it in a cedar chest. "So you'll always have it to remember her by." Sam noticed these changes with quiet appreciation. The cabin grew brighter, warmer somehow. Naomi's steady presence filled empty corners with life. He found himself smiling more often, especially when he heard her singing with Annie or watched them tending the garden together. One mild afternoon, as Naomi hung fresh washing on the line, she noticed movement at the edge of the property. A woman stood there, her dark hair braided, wearing a beautifully beaded dress. She waited with dignity, neither advancing nor retreating. Naomi's heart quickened, but she refused to show fear. Instead, she raised her hand in greeting. "Would you like to come sit? I have fresh bread cooling." The woman hesitated, then walked forward with measured steps. "I am Mourning Dove," she said, her English clear and careful. "My people live beyond the creek." "I'm Naomi," she replied, gesturing to the porch chairs. "Please rest here while I fetch some food." Inside, Naomi quickly gathered bread, butter, and the last of the winter preserves. Annie watched curiously from the doorway as she arranged everything on a tray. "That's a Cheyenne lady," Annie whispered. "Papa says they were here first." "Then we must show her proper respect as our guest," Naomi answered, leading Annie outside. Mourning Dove accepted the offered food with grace. Her dark eyes studied Naomi thoughtfully as they shared the simple meal. Annie sat nearby, fascinated by the intricate beadwork on Mourning Dove's dress. "You are new here?" Mourning Dove observed, Sam Holt's wife. "Yes," Naomi nodded, "though it hasn't been long." "The creek in the meadow," Mourning Dove said after a thoughtful pause. "It feeds the waters my people depend upon. Our treaties promise us this water." She touched a beaded pattern on her dress. "Each drop is precious to us, like these beads that tell our stories." Naomi listened intently as Mourning Dove explained how her people used the meadow's creek for generations. The water sustained their gardens, their horses, their very way of life. Now the railroad's plans threaten to divert or dam the creek entirely. "We have seen this before," Mourning Dove said quietly. "Promises broken like dry branches, but this time we cannot lose the water. Too many depend upon it." "I understand," Naomi replied, thinking of her own garden, how every seed needed water to grow. "I will speak with Sam. Perhaps together we can find a way to protect what matters to all of us." Annie brought out her rag doll to show Mourning Dove, who smiled and taught her a Cheyenne word for little sister. The afternoon light grew soft as they talked, sharing stories of gardens and children, of life's simple gifts. When Sam returned from mending fences, he found them still on the porch. His expression showed surprise but not displeasure. He removed his hat, greeting Mourning Dove with respect. "Your wife has a good heart," Mourning Dove told him. "She listens as a friend should." Sam nodded, settling into a chair. "The railroad men were marking more stakes today," he said grimly. "They're pushing closer to the creek." "They think because they have paper rights they can take what they want," Mourning Dove replied. "But water belongs to all living things. No paper can change this truth." Naomi saw the worry in both their faces. "Surely there must be a way to protect the creek," she said, "if we stand together." "The railroad has money and lawyers," Sam warned. "They grow bolder each week." Yesterday, their foreman brought armed men to survey the land. "Then we must be braver still," Mourning Dove said, rising to leave. She touched Naomi's hand gently. "Thank you for the food, and for listening." Perhaps the Great Spirit sent you here for such a time as this." They watched her walk away, her figure straight and proud against the setting sun. Annie waved until she disappeared into the gathering dusk. That night, after Annie was tucked into bed, Naomi sat by the lamp, her mending forgotten in her lap. She thought about Morning Dove's words, about water flowing through the land like life itself. She thought about bridges, not just the railroad's iron ones, but the invisible bridges between people that could be built with understanding and respect. God moves in mysterious ways, she whispered to herself, remembering how her own path had led her here. Once mocked and lonely, she had found not just a family, but perhaps a greater purpose. From Annie's room came the sound of evening prayers. "Dear God, please bless our family. Bless Mama Naomi and Papa, and Morning Dove too. Help us keep the creek safe for everyone." Naomi felt tears sliding down her cheeks, but they were different from the bitter tears she had shed at the social. These were tears of healing, of belonging, of finding strength she never knew she had. She touched the wooden cross hanging above the mantel, its surface smooth from years of prayers. Sam found her there, still sitting in the lamplight. He touched her shoulder gently. "You did a good thing today," he said. "Not many would welcome Morning Dove as you did." "She is a mother, too," Naomi replied simply, trying to protect what her children need. She looked up at him. "Sam, do you think we can really help? Against the railroad?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know," he admitted, "but I reckon standing up for what's right is worth the trying." His hand stayed on her shoulder, warm and reassuring. "Get some rest. Tomorrow will bring its own challenges." Naomi nodded, gathering her mending. As she prepared for bed, she could hear coyotes calling in the distance, their voices rising and falling like prayers in the spring night. The sound reminded her that this land held ancient rhythms, deeper than railroad stakes or property lines. She slipped under the quilt, listening to the peaceful breathing of her family. Outside, the creek still flowed, its waters singing ancient songs of life and hope. Naomi closed her eyes, knowing that whatever challenges tomorrow brought, she would face them with a healed heart and newfound strength. God had led her here for a reason, and she was ready to stand firm, like the mountains themselves, protecting what mattered most. Word spread through town like wildfire. The railroad foreman was planning a grand feast. Posters appeared on the general store's weathered boards announcing a celebration of progress, with railroad surveyors and businessmen from as far as Denver expected to attend. Naomi stood reading the notice, her basket of eggs forgotten at her feet. Around her, townspeople buzzed with excitement about the upcoming gathering. Ladies discussed what dishes they might bring, while men spoke of business opportunities the railroad would surely bring. That evening, as she stirred the stew pot over their cabin's hearth, Naomi cleared her throat. "I've been thinking about the railroad feast," she began carefully. Sam looked up from where he was helping Annie with her letters, his expression darkened. "We won't be attending that circus." "I thought—" Naomi hesitated, then pressed on. "I thought perhaps I could bake some pies. My apple and wildberry recipes were always praised at church socials back home." "Naomi," Sam's voice held warning, "those people mocked you. The foreman especially." "That's precisely why I want to go," she said quietly, "to show them I'm more than what they see." She lifted the spoon, tasting the stew. "Sometimes the best way to change hearts is through the stomach." Annie piped up from her slate, "Mama makes the best pies in the territory." Sam's stern expression softened slightly at his daughter's enthusiasm. "You really want to do this?" Naomi nodded. "I do." The next few days found Naomi busy in the kitchen. She gathered late winter apples from the root cellar and wild berries she'd preserved in the fall. Her hands worked with practiced confidence, rolling out perfect crusts and weaving delicate lattice tops. The morning of the feast arrived bright and clear. Sam loaded 6 beautiful pies into the wagon, each wrapped carefully in clean cloths. Annie proudly held the basket containing Naomi's special vanilla cream pie, reserved for the head table. The town hall had been transformed. Bunting decorated the walls, and long tables groaned under the weight of roasted meats, casseroles, and baked goods. The railroad foreman held court at the head table, surrounded by well-dressed businessmen with thick watches on gold chains. Naomi's heart pounded as she carried her pies to the dessert table. She could feel eyes following her, hear the whispers. But she held her head high, arranging her offerings with care. The feast began with speeches about progress and prosperity. The foreman raised his glass repeatedly, his face growing redder with each toast. Finally, the meal was served, and people began to eat. At first, folks avoided Naomi's pies, choosing more familiar offerings. But then the minister's wife tried a slice of apple pie and exclaimed in genuine delight. Word spread quickly. Soon, people were asking which pies were Naomi's, serving themselves generous portions. "Mrs. Holt," called one of the Denver businessmen, "this wild berry pie is exceptional." Others joined in the praise. Even some of the women who had snubbed her began asking about her recipe. Naomi felt warmth bloom in her chest as she shared her baking secrets. But then the foreman's voice cut through the pleasant atmosphere. "Well, well, no wonder these pies are so good." He winked at his companions. "Our Mrs. Holt clearly knows her way around a kitchen. Must spend plenty of time sampling her own cooking, eh?" Laughter rippled through his immediate circle. The foreman, encouraged, continued. "I'd say that hearty appetite of hers guarantees quality control." The cruel jest hung in the air. Naomi felt her face burn as more people joined the laughter. She wanted to disappear, to run as she had at the social, but Annie's small hand slipped into hers, anchoring her in place. Sam stood slowly from his seat, his chair scraping against the wooden floor. The sound cut through the laughter like a knife. His eyes, hard as steel, fixed on the foreman. The room fell silent under his glare. "My wife," Sam said in a quiet voice that somehow filled the hall, "has shown more grace today than this entire town deserves." The foreman's smile faltered. He raised his hands in mock surrender, but the damage was done. The mood of the gathering had soured. As the afternoon wore on, Naomi helped clear tables and wash dishes, refusing to let them see her cry. While stacking plates in the kitchen, she overheard voices from the back office. The door was cracked open just enough for the foreman's words to carry clearly. "The deed records are a mess," the foreman was saying. "Nobody's bothered organizing them for 20 years. Once we get our man installed as county clerk, it'll be simple enough to file our own versions." A second voice, Naomi recognized the current clerk's assistant, responded eagerly. "I can help with that, for the right price, of course." "Of course," the foreman agreed smoothly. "We'll need documents showing the water rights were sold years ago. Backdate everything properly. Those settlers and Indians won't know what hit them until it's too late." Naomi's hands trembled as she dried the same plate over and over. The plot was worse than they'd imagined. Not just bullying and pressure, but outright fraud. The wagon ride home was quiet. Once Annie was asleep, Naomi told Sam everything she'd overheard. His face grew grim as she described the foreman's scheme. "We suspected as much," he said finally, "but suspicion isn't proof. Without evidence, it's their word against ours, and right now, their words carry more weight with the territory government." "There must be something we can do," Naomi insisted. "Morning Dove's people will lose everything if they dam that creek. And what about our land?" "We'll figure something out," Sam promised, but his voice held worry. "For now, get some rest as you've had a hard day." Naomi sat alone by the fire, her thoughts churning like storm clouds. The foreman's mockery still stung, but it was overshadowed by the larger threat. This wasn't just about her dignity anymore. It was about justice, about protecting their home and their neighbors. Small footsteps padded across the floor. Annie appeared in her nightgown, her face serious in the firelight. "You're supposed to be asleep, little one," Naomi said softly. "I wanted to tell you something." Annie climbed into her lap, still small enough to fit despite being 7. "You're brave, Mama. The bravest person I know." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes as she kissed her daughter's forehead. "Thank you, sweetheart." "And your pies really are the best," Annie added with fierce loyalty. Naomi managed a small laugh, hugging Annie close. Her heart felt stronger somehow, steadied by this child's simple faith. Whatever challenges lay ahead, she would face them. Not just for herself, but for Annie, for Sam, for Morning Dove's people, and for justice itself. Dawn painted the mountain peaks in soft gold as Naomi stirred up the breakfast fire. 5 days had passed since the railroad feast, each one weighted with growing worry. She watched through the cabin window as Sam worked the fence line, his shoulders tense with determination. The sound of his hammer rang across the morning air, driving posts deeper into resistant earth. Annie sat at the rough-hewn table, spooning up her porridge while practicing her letters. "Papa's been fixing fences since sunrise," she observed, concern in her young voice. He wants to make sure our cattle stay safe, Naomi replied, though she knew the truth was more complex. Sam was fortifying their boundaries against more than just wandering livestock. After clearing away the breakfast dishes, Naomi tied on her bonnet. "I'm going to visit Morning Dove today," she told Sam as he came in for water. "There might be something in those treaties that could help us." Sam wiped sweat from his brow, studying her face. "Be careful," he said finally. "The railroad's men have been watching the trails." Naomi nodded, touched by his concern. She packed a basket with fresh bread and preserved fruit, small gifts that spoke of friendship across cultures. The walk to the Cheyenne camp took nearly an hour, following a creek that sparkled in the spring sunshine. Morning Dove met her at the edge of the camp, dark eyes warm with welcome. "Sister," she greeted Naomi, using the term that had grown natural between them. "You come with troubled thoughts." "The railroad men grow bolder," Naomi admitted as they settled inside Morning Dove's lodge. "They seek to take what isn't theirs." "As they have always done." Morning Dove's voice held old pain. "But we have kept safe what proves our rights." She rose and brought out a leather bundle, unwrapping it carefully to reveal aged papers. "The treaty?" Naomi leaned forward, eyes wide. Morning Dove nodded. "Signed by our grandfathers and your government's leaders. Here," she pointed to carefully preserved text, "it speaks of the waters. All peoples may drink, but none may dam or divert without agreement of all." Naomi studied the document, heart beating faster. "This is exactly what we need. The railroad can't legally block the creek without your people's consent." "Papers have not always protected us," Morning Dove cautioned. "But perhaps with your help," she hesitated. "Would you keep a copy safe? Our elders fear fire or theft in the camp." "Of course," Naomi agreed instantly. "I'll guard it with my life." The elders were called, their faces weathered as the hills themselves. They listened as Morning Dove explained in their language, then nodded gravely. One ancient grandmother took Naomi's hand, speaking words Morning Dove translated, "You have a true heart. Guard our truth well." With infinite care, they created a copy of the treaty, each word precisely matched. Naomi wrapped it in oilcloth, tucking it securely in her basket beneath the empty food containers. The weight of trust settled on her shoulders like a shawl. The sun was lowering when Naomi returned home. She found Sam splitting wood, his axe biting deep into each log. Something in his stance told her he'd been watching for her return. "The Cheyenne have proof," she told him, bringing out the precious copy. "Their treaty specifically protects the water rights." Sam set down his axe, wiping his palms before touching the document. His eyes moved carefully over the words. "This could change everything," he said slowly. "If we can get a judge to honor it. We have to try." Naomi touched his arm gently. "Sam, I know you've been worried, but I've never seen you back down from what's right." He looked at her then, really looked at her as if seeing past her size to the strength within. "You've got more courage than most men I know," he admitted gruffly. "Taking on the railroad, befriending the Cheyenne, facing down those town gossips. I reckon I married better than I deserved." Naomi felt warmth bloom in her chest. It was the closest Sam had come to speaking of love. Before she could respond, Annie burst out of the cabin. "Mama, Papa, supper's ready." She had insisted on setting the table herself, proud to help. They gathered around the simple meal, Annie chattering about her lessons and a nest of rabbits she'd found near the garden. The cabin felt warm, safe, almost peaceful. Then they heard hoofbeats approaching. A rider appeared in the gathering dusk, his horse lathered from hard riding. "Sam Holt," he called. "Message from town." Sam went out to meet him. Naomi and Annie watched through the window as he took the envelope, his face growing harder as he read. When he came back inside, his hands were shaking with rage. The railroad foreman filed papers with the territory court. Says he has deeds proving this land was sold to the company 5 years ago. They're demanding we vacate within 30 days. "But that's impossible," Naomi protested. "You've owned this land for 10 years. Forge enough documents, pay off enough official—" Sam's fist crashed down on the table, making the plates jump. "They think they can steal everything we've built." Annie's eyes filled with tears. "Papa, are we going to lose our home?" "No, darling." Sam's voice softened as he gathered her close. I won't let that happen. I swear it. Naomi's mind raced as they sat in stunned silence. Finally, she spoke. We need to work with Mourning Dove's people. Together, we might have a chance. The treaty, our own legal papers, witnesses who know how long you've worked this land. The town won't like that, Sam warned. Siding with Indians against the railroad. We'll be outcasts. We're already outcasts, Naomi said quietly. At least this way we'll be fighting for what's right. She met his eyes steadily. The railroad thinks we're weak because they see a heavy woman, a widowed rancher, and a peaceful tribe. Let's prove them wrong. Sam studied her for a long moment. Annie looked between them, holding her breath. Finally, Sam nodded slowly. I reckon you're right. If we're going to lose everything anyway, might as well lose it standing tall. We won't lose, Annie declared with fierce faith. God helps people who help each other. Mama always says so. Naomi pulled her stepdaughter close, breathing in the scent of sunshine in her hair. Yes, he does, little one. Yes, he does. They finished their meal in thoughtful silence, each wrestling with fears and hopes. Outside, a coyote called lonely across the darkening land. But inside the cabin, 3 hearts beat stronger together, finding courage and unity. Tomorrow would bring its own battles. Tonight they had truth, family, and the first glimpses of a plan. Sam's hand found Naomi's across the table, rough fingers closing gentle around her own. In that touch lay trust, respect, and something deeper neither dared yet name. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. Morning sunlight crept over the mountain peaks as Sam hitched the wagon. Naomi settled Annie between them on the wooden seat, smoothing the girl's Sunday dress. The 3-mile journey to town stretched before them, each hoofbeat bringing them closer to confrontation. The sheriff's a fair man, Sam said, breaking the silence. Known him 20 years. If anyone will listen, it'll be him. Naomi nodded, though worry gnawed at her heart. The wagon wheels creaked over familiar ruts in the dirt road. Annie hummed hymns softly, her small hand finding Naomi's larger one for comfort. The sheriff's office sat quiet in the early morning shadows. Inside, worn wooden floors carried the weight of countless troubles before theirs. Sheriff Miller looked up from his desk, his weathered face creasing with concern at their arrival. Sam, he greeted, standing. Mrs. Holt, little Annie. He gestured to the chairs before his desk. What brings you folks in so early? Sam pulled the railroad's eviction notice from his coat. Got this yesterday. Railroad claims they own my land I've worked for 10 years straight. The sheriff took the paper, reading slowly. His frown deepened with each line. They filed proper deeds with the territory court, he said finally. Dated 5 years back. Forged deeds, Naomi spoke up. The railroad foreman's been bragging about having friends in the clerk's office. Bragging's not proof, ma'am. The sheriff's voice held genuine regret. Without evidence of forgery, my hands are tied by legal paper. What about this? Sam produced the copy of the Cheyenne Treaty. Shows the railroad can't block water access without tribal consent. Sheriff Miller studied the document. This is serious business, Sam. Mixing Indian treaties into white man's law? Folks won't take kindly to it. So you won't help? Annie's small voice quivered with disappointment. The sheriff knelt before her chair. I'm bound by law, little one, but that don't make it right. He stood, addressing Sam and Naomi. Best advice I can give is get yourself a good lawyer. Meanwhile, I'll keep my eyes open for any proof of forgery. They left the office as church bells began to toll. Other wagons rolled into town, carrying families in their Sunday best. Naomi straightened her plain dress, conscious of every eye upon them as they joined the flow toward the white-painted church. Inside, lamplight cast warm shadows on familiar wooden pews. The congregation settled into their usual places, though a noticeable space remained around Sam, Naomi, and Annie. Whispers fluttered like restless birds. The railroad foreman sat prominently near the front, his dark suit a statement of prosperity and power. As the preacher prepared to begin, the foreman turned, his voice carrying deliberately. Shame when women forget their proper place, he announced to his companions. Meddling in men's business, stirring up Indians against progress. Naomi felt heat rise in her cheeks as heads turned. A woman behind her whispered loud enough to hear, Poor Sam Holt, taking her out of pity. Now see what trouble she's brought? Annie's small hand squeezed Naomi's arm fiercely. Sam's jaw clenched. but he stayed silent as the service began. Naomi tried to focus on the hymns, but shame pressed down like a physical weight. She had known the town's judgment would worsen, but experiencing it cut deep. The preacher's sermon seemed to speak directly to her heart. 2 Corinthians reminds us, he said, his gentle voice filling the church, that God's power is made perfect in weakness. When we are weak, then we are strong. After the final hymn, most folks hurried past without meeting their eyes. The preacher approached as they gathered their things. "Mrs. Holt," he said kindly, "might I share a word?" They stepped aside as Sam took Annie to ready the wagon. The preacher's eyes held compassion. "The Lord often chooses unlikely vessels for his work," he said softly. David was but a shepherd boy. Moses struggled to speak clearly, yet God used their weakness to show his strength. Tears threatened to spill from Naomi's eyes. "It's so hard," she whispered, facing their scorn, feeling like a burden to Sam. "You are neither weak nor a burden," the preacher assured her. "I see God's hand in bringing you to Sam and Annie. Remember, Jesus himself was despised and rejected, yet through that rejection came salvation." His words gave her strength to hold her head high as she walked to the wagon. But the ride home felt heavy with unspoken tension. Sam barely spoke, his thoughts clearly churning behind stern features. That evening, after a quiet supper, Sam paced to the cabin like a caged animal. Every attempt Naomi made at conversation met short replies. Annie watched them anxiously, sensing the growing distance. "Papa?" she ventured finally. "Are you angry at Mama?" Sam stopped pacing. "No, child. Just got much on my mind." "Then why won't you talk to her?" Annie's question hung in the air. "Some burdens a man must carry alone," Sam said gruffly and strode outside into the gathering dusk. Naomi's heart ached as she tucked Annie into bed. "Your papa loves you very much," she assured the girl. "He's just worried about our home." "He loves you too," Annie insisted, clinging to Naomi's neck. "Please don't go away." "I'm not going anywhere," Naomi promised, though uncertainty gnawed at her soul. She kissed Annie's forehead and moved to the main room, lighting the lamp against the darkness. Sam's empty chair by the fire spoke volumes. Outside, she could hear him chopping wood by moonlight, his way of working out frustration. The rhythmic thud of the axe seemed to echo her own isolation. Naomi knelt by the hearth, clasping her hands in prayer. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't know how to carry these burdens. The town's scorn I can bear, but Sam's distance." Tears fell freely now. "Give me strength to be what this family needs. Show me the way forward." The full moon cast silver light through the window, painting patterns on the rough wooden floor. From the hills came the mournful song of coyotes, calling to each other across the vast night. Their cries spoke to the loneliness in Naomi's heart, the fear that perhaps she truly was nothing more than a convenient solution to Sam's problems. She remained there long after the sound of chopping ceased, after Sam's boots crossed the porch and headed for the barn where he'd taken to sleeping. The lamp burned low, its light barely holding back the shadows that seemed to press in from all sides. Annie's soft breathing from the other room reminded her why she must endure. Whatever came next, that child needed her. And somewhere beneath Sam's pride and anger, Naomi believed he needed her too, even if he couldn't admit it yet. The coyotes called again, their voices threading through the moonlight like silver needles. Naomi wrapped her shawl tighter, fighting back the cold that seemed to seep into her very bones. Tomorrow would bring new battles, new judgments to face. But tonight she could only pray for wisdom, for courage, and for the love she felt slipping away like water through her fingers. The days stretched long and silent at the homestead. Morning mist clung to the meadows as Sam rode out at first light, his broad shoulders hunched against some invisible weight. He would return after sunset, hands rough from mending fences, speaking only when necessary about chores or weather. Naomi kept the cabin in order, her movements quiet and careful like a ghost haunting familiar rooms. She cooked hearty meals that Sam barely tasted, darned clothes he hardly acknowledged, and tried not to let her hurt show when he took his plate to eat alone on the porch. Only Annie's presence brought any warmth to their fractured home. The child fluttered between them like a determined sparrow, trying to weave together the fraying threads of their family. She would drag her father inside from his self-imposed exile, chattering about Naomi's fresh-baked bread or new song she had learned. "Papa, taste Mama's apple cake," Annie would insist, or "Papa, come see the flowers Mama planted." Each time she said, "Mama," Naomi noticed Sam's slight flinch, though he never corrected the child. One evening, as purple twilight settled over the land, Naomi carried fresh linens to the bedroom. She found Sam standing motionless by the cedar chest, holding a faded quilt in work-roughened hands. The pattern was simple but lovely, flying geese in worn blues and browns, his first wife's handiwork. Naomi hesitated in the doorway, unsure whether to retreat, but something in his stance, the slope of his shoulders, the careful way he touched the fabric, made her step forward. "She made this our first winter here," Sam said softly, not turning around. "Worked on it by lamplight after long days of helping clear the land. Never complained once about the cold or the work." "She sounds like a remarkable woman," Naomi offered gently. Sam's fingers traced the stitches. She was. Strong, but gentle too. Known her since we were young. Courted proper. Took our time. He fell silent for a long moment. Not like. The unfinished thought hung heavy in the air. Not like us, Naomi's heart filled in. Not like this hasty marriage born of desperation and a child's need. "I reckon I rushed into this," Sam finally said, still not meeting her eyes. "Weren't fair to you, pushing you into a dead woman's shoes. Weren't fair to her memory, neither." Each word landed like a physical blow, but Naomi forced herself to stand steady. "You did what you thought best for Annie," she said quietly. "Did I?" His voice was rough with doubt. "Or did I just grab the first willing woman too proud to admit I couldn't manage alone?" Naomi's throat tightened. She wanted to reach for him, to argue that their marriage could be more than mere convenience. But his stance remained rigid, closed off. Some distances couldn't be bridged by words alone. "I'll leave you with your memories," she whispered, backing away. In the main room, she pressed a hand to her mouth, holding back tears until she reached the kitchen garden. That night, sleep eluded her. She dozed fitfully in her narrow bed, dreams swirling like autumn leaves. In them, she walked away from the homestead, back toward her old life of loneliness and mockery. But each time she reached the road, Annie's voice called out, "Don't leave, Mama!" The child's plea anchored her, pulling her back like a lifeline. Dawn found her still wakeful, watching pearl gray light seep through her window. The house creaked with familiar morning sounds. Sam's heavy steps as he headed to the barn, Annie's soft breathing from the next room. Naomi dressed quietly, wrote a note about breakfast keeping warm in the oven, and slipped outside. The morning air held a hint of coming fall as she walked the familiar path to the small white church. Dew dampened her skirts, but she barely noticed. Her heart felt as heavy as her steps. The church door stood unlocked as always. Inside, morning light filtered through simple glass windows, painting the wooden pews with pale gold. Naomi moved to the front, knelt on the hard floor, and finally let her tears flow freely. "Lord," she whispered, "I don't know if I'm strong enough for this. I thought I could build a real family here, but Sam's heart seems closed to me. Maybe I was foolish to think a woman like me could ever be more than an object of pity." Her prayers poured out like water from a broken vessel. All her fears, her loneliness, her aching need to belong. She prayed for Sam, for Annie, for wisdom to know her path forward. The creak of floorboards made her straighten, hastily wiping her eyes. Morning Dove stood in the doorway, her dark eyes gentle with understanding. "I did not mean to interrupt your prayers, sister," the Cheyenne woman said softly. "I saw you pass my camp and thought you might want company." Naomi managed a watery smile. "The Lord works in mysterious ways. I was just asking for guidance." Morning Dove settled beside her on the rough wooden floor, her movements graceful despite her age. "Perhaps that is why he led me here. I bring news that may light your path." "What news?" "The elders have met in council these past nights," Morning Dove explained. "They have decided to bring our treaty documents before the territorial court. The papers prove our rights to the water, signed by government agents in the presence of witnesses." Hope stirred in Naomi's chest. That could stop the railroad from taking the land. Morning Dove nodded. "But we cannot go alone. The white man's courts treat Indian testimony like smoke in the wind. We need someone respected to stand with us, someone who understands both worlds. Surely Sam would. Your husband is a good man, but his pride makes him walk alone. We need someone with a different kind of courage." Morning Dove's dark eyes met Naomi's. Someone who knows what it means to be judged unfairly yet stands tall anyway. Understanding dawned slowly. Me? But I'm nothing special. Just a woman who faced mockery with dignity, Morning Dove interrupted firmly, who opened her heart to a grieving child, who treats my people with respect when others turn away. The Great Spirit does not make mistakes, sister. Perhaps all you have endured has prepared you for this moment. Naomi looked up at the rough-hewn cross on the wall, remembering the preacher's words about God's strength made perfect in weakness. In her mind, she heard again the cruel laughter at the social, felt the sting of recent whispers in church. But she also remembered Annie's fierce love, Morning Dove's steady friendship, and the small ways she had already begun to bridge different worlds. "If I stand with you," she said slowly, "some folks will never forgive me. They already think I'm causing trouble, stepping out of a woman's proper place." Morning Dove's smile held gentle wisdom. "And what does your heart tell you is a woman's proper place?" "Wherever God calls her to serve," Naomi answered, the words rising from some deep place of certainty. "Wherever love and justice need a voice." "Then you have your answer, sister." Naomi closed her eyes, feeling peace settle over her like a warm blanket. The path ahead would not be easy, but at least now she could see it clearly. God had not brought her to this place simply to be a convenient wife or replacement mother. He had brought her here to be a bridge between cultures, between justice and greed, between fear and hope. Morning Dove touched her shoulder lightly. "Come, the sun rises higher and there is much to prepare." Together they walked from the church into the brightening day. Birds called from the cottonwoods, and a cool breeze carried the scent of sage. Naomi lifted her face to the morning light, feeling stronger with each step. She might not be the wife Sam had expected or the woman the town respected, but she was exactly who God meant her to be. And for now, that was enough. The morning sun climbed higher as Naomi walked the familiar path home, her steps lighter despite the dust clinging to her hem. Peace settled in her heart, like a warm quilt, wrapping around the certainty of her purpose. As the homestead came into view, she saw Sam splitting wood near the barn, his axe rising and falling in a steady rhythm. Annie spotted her first, running from where she'd been playing with her rag doll on the porch. "Mama, you missed breakfast." She wrapped her arms around Naomi's waist, and Naomi bent to kiss her golden head. "I left some warming in the oven for you both," Naomi reminded her gently. Sam paused in his work, leaning on his axe handle as she approached. His eyes held questions, noting her early absence, but his expression remained guarded. "Saw you heading toward town at first light. I needed to pray," Naomi said simply. She squared her shoulders, drawing strength from her morning's revelation. "Sam, I need to tell you something important. Could we talk inside?" He nodded slowly, following her into the cabin's cooler shadows. Annie trailed behind them, settling at the table with her doll while Naomi poured fresh coffee into tin cups. "Morning Dove came to me at the church," Naomi began, watching steam rise from the cups. "The Cheyenne elders have made a decision about the creek rights." Sam's weathered face tightened. "Reckon they mean to fight the railroad?" "Not with weapons," Naomi assured him. "They have treaty documents, proper legal papers signed by government agents with witnesses. They mean to present them to the territorial court." "Papers don't mean much when money's involved," Sam said bitterly. "Railroads got friends in high places. That's why they need our help." Naomi took a deep breath. "They've asked me to stand with them to help present their case to the townsfolk first. Someone who understands both sides." Sam set his cup down hard enough to slosh coffee onto the table. "You? Naomi, these aren't your troubles to fix. The town already whispers about you meddling where you don't belong." "Maybe that's exactly why it needs to be me," she said quietly. "I know what it means to be judged unfairly, to have others decide your worth without knowing your heart. The Cheyenne face the same thing every day." "It's dangerous," Sam warned. "Railroad men don't take kindly to interference, especially from a woman." Naomi met his gaze steadily. "I know, but sometimes doing right matters more than being safe." Sam studied her face for a long moment, seeing perhaps for the first time the quiet fire burning behind her gentle eyes. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. "You mean to do this with or without my blessing, don't you?" "I have to follow my conscience," Naomi said, "but I'd rather have you beside me." Annie looked up from her doll, her small face serious. "Are we going to help Morning Dove's people, Papa?" Sam ran a hand through his graying hair, glancing between his daughter's hopeful expression and his wife's determined one. Finally, he sighed. "Reckon we are. Lord help us all." He stood, reaching for his hat. "Might as well ride out today. Hear what the elders have to say." Joy bloomed in Naomi's chest, but she kept her voice steady. "I'll pack some food for the journey." Within the hour, they were mounted and heading toward the Cheyenne camp. Sam on his sturdy gelding, Naomi on a gentle mare, and Annie riding double with her father. The late morning sun warmed their backs as they followed the creek's winding path. The camp appeared gradually through the trees, leather lodges rising like earth-colored hills, smoke threading up from cooking fires. Children played between the lodges, their laughter carrying on the breeze. Several men looked up from their work as the family approached, their faces carefully neutral. Mourning Dove emerged from her lodge, raising a hand in greeting. "Welcome, friends. The elders are gathered, waiting to speak with you." She led them to a larger lodge where several older men sat in a circle, their faces lined with wisdom and concern. Sam removed his hat respectfully as they entered. Annie stayed close to Naomi's skirts, wide-eyed, but curious. A white-haired elder gestured for them to sit. Through Mourning Dove's translation, he explained the treaty's history, how it had been negotiated in good faith, promising the Cheyenne people continued access to the creek's water for their horses and crops. From a beautifully beaded leather case, he withdrew carefully preserved papers covered in formal script and official seals. As Mourning Dove translated each section, Naomi listened intently, asking thoughtful questions about dates and details. Sam remained quiet, but attentive, his expression growing grimmer as he realized the strength of their claim. "The railroad ignores these rights," Mourning Dove explained, her voice heavy with frustration. "They say progress cannot wait for old promises, but without the creek, our people cannot survive here." Outside the lodge, children's voices rose in play. Annie had slipped out earlier, drawn by their games, and now her clear laugh mingled with theirs. The sound bridged any differences of language or culture. Just children sharing joy in the summer sunshine. Naomi touched the treaty papers gently. "These need to be shown to the town council first," she said. "If we can win their support before going to the territorial court, it will carry more weight." "The council meets in 3 days," Sam added, speaking for the first time. "Time enough to gather witnesses who remember the treaty signing." The elder nodded approvingly, speaking again through Mourning Dove. "You have a good heart, woman who stands tall," he said to Naomi, using a name that made her blush. "We trust you to speak our truth." As the sun began its westward slide, the family shared a simple meal with Mourning Dove's people: dried meat, corn cakes, and sweet berries. Annie played contentedly with the other children, any strangeness forgotten in the universal language of childhood games. Naomi sat near the cooking fire, watching Mourning Dove prepare evening tea. The older woman's movements were sure and graceful as she measured herbs into the pot. "The creek gives us more than water," Mourning Dove explained, stirring the brewing tea. "These healing plants grow nowhere else nearby. Our grandmothers have gathered them here since before any treaties were made. The railroad men cannot understand that some things are worth more than money." "I'll help them understand," Naomi promised. "Even if they mock me again, I won't stay silent." The sun painted the western sky in shades of gold and rose as they prepared to ride home. The elder presented Naomi with copies of the treaty documents, carefully wrapped in soft leather. The responsibility settled on her shoulders like a mantle, heavy but somehow right. Sam helped Annie mount up, then paused beside his own horse, watching Naomi say goodbye to Mourning Dove. The two women embraced like sisters, their differences forgotten in shared purpose. As they rode home through the gathering dusk, Sam guided his horse closer to Naomi's. Annie had fallen asleep against his chest, her small face peaceful in the fading light. "I was wrong earlier," he said quietly. Naomi glanced at him, surprised by the admission. "About these not being your troubles to fix," he continued. "Watching you today with the elders, seeing how you listened and asked the right questions." He paused, choosing his words carefully. "You've got a courage I never expected, Naomi. A different kind than what I'm used to, but real all the same." Warmth spread through Naomi's chest, sweeter than any praise she'd ever received. "Thank you, Sam. I'm starting to think the Lord knew what he was about, sending you to us that night." Sam's voice grew softer, even if I was too proud to see it at first. Naomi blinked back tears, hope unfurling like spring leaves in her heart. Perhaps their hasty marriage, born of necessity and a child's need, could grow into something deeper. Love could take root in the most unexpected soil, she was learning, if given time and tender care. They rode on through the gentle evening, three figures moving together through the shadowed land. Above them, the first stars appeared, bright as promise in the darkening sky. The morning sun cast long shadows across Main Street as wagons and riders converged on the whitewashed church hall. Townsfolk gathered in clusters, voices hushed and curious. Naomi's hands trembled slightly as she clutched the leather bundle containing the treaty documents. Sam steadied her elbow as they approached the steps, Annie skipping ahead with innocent excitement. Mourning Dove and 3 Cheyenne elders waited beneath the oak tree, dignified in their ceremonial dress. Whispers rippled through the crowd at their presence. Some stepped back, others merely stared. The railroad foreman stood near the entrance, arms crossed, a sneer playing at his lips. "Quite the circus you've brought to town," he called out, loud enough for all to hear. Naomi lifted her chin, refusing to let his mockery pierce her resolve. The leather bundle felt warm against her heart, carrying the weight of truth within its folds. Sam's hand found the small of her back, a quiet gesture of support that gave her strength. The circuit preacher appeared in the doorway, his weathered face grave but kind. "All God's children are welcome in his house," he announced, gesturing for everyone to enter. Inside, morning light filtered through tall windows, dust motes dancing in the beams. The wooden pews filled quickly. Ranch hands, shopkeepers, farmers' wives in their Sunday best. The sheriff sat near the front, his expression carefully neutral. Mourning Dove and the elders took seats near the wall, their presence commanding quiet respect despite the sideways glances. Annie tugged Naomi's skirt. "Can I sit with Mourning Dove?" "Of course, dear." Naomi watched her daughter skip over to the Cheyenne woman, who welcomed her with a gentle smile. The sight warmed her heart. A child's innocent acceptance cutting through years of prejudice. The preacher called the meeting to order with a brief prayer for wisdom and justice. Then he nodded to Naomi. "Mrs. Holt, you've brought evidence regarding the disputed water rights. Please share what you found." Naomi's legs felt wooden as she walked to the front. The railroad foreman's smirk seemed to mock each step, but when she turned to face the crowd, she found Sam's steady gaze, and her voice grew stronger. "These documents," she began, carefully unwrapping the leather bundle, "are the original treaty signed between the United States government and the Cheyenne people. They guarantee access to the creek waters for their survival." The foreman barked out a laugh. "Scraps of paper, nothing more, probably forged by savages who can't even write." "Sir," the preacher warned sharply, "we will have civil discourse here." Naomi's hand steadied as she held up the first page, its official seals clearly visible. This treaty was witnessed by 3 territorial judges and a military commander. Their signatures are here, along with the president's seal. She began reading the careful script aloud, her voice growing in confidence with each word. The clause about water rights was explicit, guaranteeing the Cheyenne people permanent access to the creek and its tributaries for their horses, crops, and medicinal plants. A murmur ran through the crowd. Several older ranchers nodded, remembering the treaty's signing. The sheriff leaned forward, his brow furrowed in concentration. "That's all very touching," the foreman interrupted, "but progress can't be stopped by ancient promises to human beings," Naomi cut in, surprising herself with her boldness. "To families who depend on water just as we do. The treaty is clear. This land was meant to be shared." "And who are you to lecture us?" the foreman sneered. "Some fat spinster so desperate she'd marry the first widower who'd have her? Now playing savior to Indians?" The cruel words hung in the air like smoke. A few people tittered nervously, but most shifted uncomfortably in their seats. Annie's face crumpled, and she started to rise, but Mourning Dove held her gently. Before Naomi could respond, Sam's chair scraped back. He stood slowly, his presence filling the room. Those who knew him grew very still, recognizing the dangerous quiet in his stance. "That's my wife you're insulting," he said, his voice low but carrying to every corner. "The woman who's brought more grace and courage to my home than I deserved. Who loves my daughter like her own. Who sees truth and stands for it no matter the cost." He walked to join Naomi at the front, taking her hand. "I married her sudden, that's true, but God's mercy sent her to us that night. And I love her with my whole heart, not from pity, but because she's shown me what real strength looks like." Tears welled in Naomi's eyes as Sam squeezed her fingers. The room had gone completely silent. Every face turned toward them. Annie broke free from Mourning Dove and ran forward, wrapping her arms around Naomi's waist. "Mama!" she called out clearly, proudly. This time, no one laughed. No one even smiled mockingly. Instead, several women dabbed at their eyes and more than a few men looked down abashed at their previous judgment. The sheriff cleared his throat. "I'd like time to review these documents properly, Mrs. Holt. The treaty's implications could affect many property claims in the territory." The foreman's face had grown red with fury. "This is absurd. You can't possibly take seriously these allegations from a woman who speaks truth before God," the preacher interrupted firmly, "while others scheme in darkness." His eyes fixed meaningfully on the foreman. "The Lord sees all our dealings, sir. Justice belongs to him, not to men who forge deeds in secret." A gasp went up from the crowd. The foreman's face went from red to white. "You have no proof of such accusations." "Perhaps not yet," the sheriff said quietly. "But I reckon that's worth looking into as well, don't you?" The foreman grabbed his hat, shoving past people as he stormed toward the door. "This isn't over," he shouted back. "Progress won't wait for backward sentiment." The bang of the door echoed through the sudden quiet. Then, gradually, people began to talk among themselves. The sheriff approached to examine the documents more closely. Mourning Dove and the elders came forward to answer questions about the treaty's history. Naomi stayed where she was, Sam's hand warm in hers, Annie still hugging her waist. Her legs felt weak with relief, but her heart was full. She had stood her ground, spoken truth, and found her voice at last. Mrs. Peterson, who had once whispered cruel jokes about Naomi's size, approached hesitantly. "That was brave, what you did," she said softly. "Standing up for what's right. I'm sorry for how we treated you before." Others followed, offering awkward but sincere words of respect. The preacher's wife embraced her warmly. Even old Mr. Jenkins, who rarely spoke to anyone, tipped his hat as he passed. Mourning Dove touched Naomi's arm gently. "Woman who stands tall," she said, using the name the elders had given her. "You have made a bridge where others built walls. My people will not forget." Naomi blushed at the praise but stood straighter. She had found her place at last, not as someone to be pitied or mocked, but as a woman of substance and worth. Sam's love, Annie's trust, and her own quiet courage had proven stronger than cruel words or unjust schemes. The morning light streamed stronger through the windows now, touching everything with gold. Outside, horses stamped and wagons creaked as people began to leave. The sheriff carefully wrapped the treaty documents, promising to guard them until the territorial court could review the case. Naomi knew the battle wasn't truly over. The railroad foreman would not give up easily, and change came slowly to frontier towns. But something had shifted today, like spring earth finally thawing after a long winter. Seeds of justice had been planted, and they would grow in their time. Sam helped Annie into their wagon, then turned to lift Naomi up beside him. His touch was gentle, his eyes warm with pride and love. As they drove home through the bright morning, Naomi felt peace settle in her heart. She had found her voice, her courage, and her family, gifts beyond price given by a God who saw past surface judgments to the truth of a person's worth. The railroad workers slouched against their horses, sneering at Sam as he worked the fence line. Their leader, a burly man with tobacco-stained teeth, spat in the dirt. "Might be an accident happens to this pretty homestead," he drawled. "Shame if your barn caught fire." Before Sam could respond, Naomi strode forward, her shadow stretching long in the evening light. "You'll do no such thing," she declared, her voice steady. Hoofbeats thundered as Mourning Dove appeared with 3 elders and the sheriff. The lawman dismounted, treaty papers in hand. "These men were just leaving," he announced firmly. "Their forged deeds won't hold up in territorial court." The workers slunk away, casting dark looks over their shoulders. By supper time, the homestead rang with celebration. Settlers and Cheyenne sharing food and song together. Annie danced between the cultures, her laughter bright as sunshine. Sam pulled Naomi close. "You saved more than our land," he whispered. "You saved my soul from bitterness." "We're a real family now," Annie proclaimed, hugging them both. Naomi's tears fell freely, but this time from joy. The homestead bloomed under summer's gentle touch. In the vegetable patch, Naomi's rows of corn and beans stretched toward the sun while herbs scented the morning air. Annie skipped between the garden beds, hauling water and singing hymns. "Papa, tell about when you trapped beaver up north," she begged each evening. Sam, mellowed by peace, shared tales of mountain passes and trading posts that made Annie's eyes shine. At Sunday service, the preacher's words rang clear, "In Christ we are one family." The congregation nodded, greeting Naomi with genuine smiles. Martha Jenkins and Sarah Miller, who once whispered cruel jokes, approached her afterward. "We're having a quilting bee Tuesday next," Martha offered softly. "Could use your steady stitches." Naomi accepted with quiet dignity. That evening, Sam presented her with a gift, a wooden comb carved with delicate flowers. "Been working on it weeks," he admitted, taking her hand. "Should have told you sooner how much you mean to me." "I love you both," Annie whispered, hugging them tight. By lamplight, they sat together while the creek song drifted through open windows, a reminder that grace, like water, belonged to everyone. Summer light bathed the meadow in golden warmth as families gathered for the celebration. Quilts dotted the grass near the creek where children splashed and played, their laughter carrying on the gentle breeze. Mourning Dove's people shared traditional foods while settler women laid out pies and fresh bread. The circuit preacher stood, raising his hands toward heaven. "Let us thank the Lord for bringing justice and healing to this land," he proclaimed, his voice carrying across the gathering. Naomi felt tears well up as the last shadows of shame lifted from her heart. Sam's hand found hers, squeezing gently. Before everyone, he declared in his deep voice, "She is no man's joke. She is the strong woman who saved this valley." Murmurs of agreement and warm applause rippled through the crowd. Annie scrambled into Naomi's lap, wrapping small arms around her neck. "I love you, Mama," she whispered. As evening approached, lantern light began to glow. Voices joined together in Amazing Grace, the hymn floating across the peaceful meadow. Naomi looked at the faces around her, family, friends, neighbors united, and felt gratitude overflow in her heart. What had begun with mockery had transformed through faith into something beautiful: love, justice, and restored hope. Thank you for listening. Stories connect us in the most unexpected ways. If you felt that spark today, make sure you're subscribed. I share a new one daily, and the next might change your day.